Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Stuart Clough. I'm a communications manager here at Moorepay, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce the topic for you for this session, which is HR Essentials Change Management. Now, before we get into the main agenda, there's a few housekeeping exercises and bits I just want to cover quickly. And then we'll just talk a little bit about both Moorepay, and I'll introduce Carl, today's presenter, as well. So, few things first. Number one, questions. So you should see on your panel on the webinar screen that you have a sort of question box, a chat box, and you can say anything you like in the chat box, and we'll be able to respond in there. But if you post questions as they come to your head as you go through the session, you post your questions in that question box. Then when we get to the question and answer section, I'll be able to put those to Carl, and we can try and really get into the detail of anything you want to talk through. So that's kind of the best way. And obviously you can also post them when we get to the question period itself. And often we find that the question session itself will often spur a number of other questions from attendees. So if you think of anything, then post it. If you think of anything during the session, then post it, and we'll be able to cover it in the question period. Okay, so that's questions. We have today 217 registered for the webinar itself. So people are continuing to join at the moment. So we'll see how many we get to. But because there's so many on the webinar, we keep mics muted just to prevent disruption. It becomes generally pretty much unmanageable after 10:15. So we run it that way instead. Now the other thing is, oh yes, so we'll be sharing a video and hosting it on our website after we've finished the webinar and closed it down and everything. So we'll share that with everyone once it's ready. And then obviously you are free to share that with colleagues, your networks, anyone you think is relevant. And we'll also share with you, obviously information of other webinars that we've got coming up as well. Not just in HR, but in other topics as well. Okay, so without any further ado, let me just quickly push on and tell you a little bit more about Moorepay and what we do for those of you who aren't familiar with the business. So at Moorepay, we're a payroll and HR solutions provider. We consider ourselves a trusted expert, and that's not just us saying it, that's also what commentators on the industry have said. We are, ranked by Nelson and other affiliated bodies as a trusted expert. We've been in the business of payroll and HR for 52 years. We celebrated our half century in 2016. We have over 10,000 customers throughout the UK, in Northern Ireland, and some in Ireland as well. So a lot of customers. From our payroll side, we actually pay between us and our sister business, NGA UK in Ireland. We pay 1 in 6 of the UK workforce. That's 18%. And I was reliably informed recently that makes us one of the largest contributors to the tax man. So, don't blame us. That's just how it is. We do 150 HR and health and safety engagements every day. Through all manner of activities, from covering inquiries into our advice line. We have a team of advocates that are representing our customers in employment tribunal and the appeal tribunal every day. We have health and safety consultants and HR consultants that are visiting businesses and helping them with their policies and helping them with their processes and practices. And as you might expect, obviously we're an industry accredited provider. There's a whole host of logos on there, but suffice to say, if there's any industry body worth its name in either of the payroll or HR field, we are members or significant parties of. For example, on the payroll side. I think we were the first accredited member of the Chartered Institute of Payroll Professionals, and we're very deeply embedded with them, but we're also very deeply embedded with the CIPD as well. And you can see that the wheel up there, as we like to call it, the wheel, you can see there's a whole host of services we provide, from HR software, employee benefits, people analytics, to training, through auto enrollment, learning management solutions, a whole host of things that if you care to find more out about, you can give us a call or visit the Moorepay website. And if you go to solutions on the Moorepay website, you'll find out plenty of information there as well. So that's a little bit about Moorepay. But now let me tell you a little bit more about the presenter for this session, Mr. Carl Hardcastle. Carl's an employment law consultant here at Moorepay, qualified in both law and HR, straddles both fields. He's a member, as you might expect, of the CIPD. He's got over 20 years experience of both contentious and non-contentious cases, and he is in himself not a contentious chap. You'll find him very amenable. He's worked at Moorepay for, let's say, over 8 years. He specialises here in redundancy, disciplinary, TUPE transfers, and wider contentious employee relations. He's a very friendly man, as you're about to hear. You're free to connect with Carl, obviously, email him if you have any questions or anything, or you can always get through to him through the advice line as well. But so that's Moorepay, and that's your presenter today. So without further ado, allow me to hand over to Carl, who will take you through today's agenda.
Lovely. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you very much for that. Yep, that's a little bit about me. Thank goodness Stuart's moved the picture of me on fairly quickly, because the last thing we want is those 200 and odd people to quickly kind of log out of this morning's presentation. So thank you, Stuart, for doing me a favour. Just before we go through the agenda, I'm keen that, as Stuart indicated at the top of this presentation, that it's a two-way process. Yes, of course, I've got a lot of information I want to get across this morning, and that will take me hopefully 15, 20 minutes. I'm aware you're all busy people, but I do think change management, as we progress, is going to become more and more prevalent. So the two-way process, there's a chat box. Any questions as you go along, feel free to ask them. And at the end of this presentation, there is a Q&A session as well, so I can hopefully answer any questions that you have in that. But if there's anything personal or anything that's a little bit sensitive, then we'll take it offline. I'll gladly email, I'll gladly get back to you after this presentation. So again, keen for a two-way process. I will mention Brexit only once today, and I promise you it will be brief. So that's my caveat at the top of this presentation. There's a few slides today, but they're heavy on content. So as you can see, there's 6 slides there. Don't think you've got to make lots of notes. These slides will be available for you later. And likewise, if you see anything you're not sure about, anything you require clarification, if you're customers of ours, please feel free to contact. If you're not customers, still contact us anyway. Fingers crossed you'll become customers in the future. Okay, so slide number 1. What is change management? Well, change management are HR words for things that happen all the time in the workplace. We all work for busy MDs. We all work for CEOs. Can we just knock it back to the agenda, please, if we could, Stuart? Thank you. We all work for busy MDs, the busy kind of CEOs of the business. Always want to kind of reinvent their business, drive their businesses forward, and of course businesses involve people. So basically change management is changing with your staff, with your people, working in different styles, way, methods, and this morning I'm going to explain how that can happen. The second slide we're going to look at this morning is contractual and non-contractual changes. And again, that's HR speak. There's a significant, important difference between the two. Contractual, well, the clue's in the title. Those are things that are laid down in stone, that are more difficult to shift an employee from. The non-contractual things, that's fairly easy. We can kind of do that within a day, a couple of days, 3 days, to shift people from non-contractual changes. There's an important difference between the two. And I'd like to spend some time this morning for identifying the two differences. I am aware there's a lot of seasoned HR professionals listening. They'll probably know what they are, but ultimately it's important that we identify them. Slide number 3 this morning is the business rationale. This is becoming more and more important. An employment tribunal will look at your business rationale with great detail. So should you find yourself in tribunal for constructive dismissal, for unfair dismissal, for wrongful dismissal, the tribunal will look at what exactly was your business rationale for getting where you needed to be. What changes did you need to make and why did you need to make them? A tribunal judge will not put themselves in your MD's shoes, but what he will look at is, have you decided to do something on a proportionate means for a legitimate business aim? More about that later. That's a bit wordy, but I will come back to that. Slide number 4. I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on this, the required process. Employment law loves a process. There's no two ways about it. If you assume, if you jump stages, if you take for granted things, a tribunal will come down very heavily on you. So there will be a process we have to adhere to if we're looking to bring in change into the workplace. And quite frankly, change happens on a weekly, monthly, certainly yearly basis in most organisations. No organisation can stand still. An organisation that stood still is effectively failing, but you need to bring the people with you. More about that on the process. As mentioned on slide number 5 is the questions, as mentioned previously from Stuart and myself. That's a chance for us to get into a little bit about any questions, any queries that you've got. I'll certainly look to answer them this morning. And as I said previously, if we get too many, and that happens, or if they become a little bit too identifiable to your organisation, we'll take them offline and we'll deal with them later. And number 6, some additional content, some free things you can get from us. Speaking as a proud Yorkshireman, anything that's free is good for me. So that's more content that you can get. So that's this morning's agenda on a cold, blustery November morning. Okay, so what is change management? If we can just knock the slide over, please. Okay, this morning I don't intend to read through all of the slides. I am aware that these slides are available for you, and I am aware that you can all read yourself, so you don't need kind of me to read through that slide. But company leaders, business leaders, MDs, CEOs always like to make HR managers' life difficult. For any HR manager that's listening to that, I'm sure that many a time you've been dragged into a meeting and your business leader has said, I want to achieve this, I want to shut down this plant, I want to open up this, I want to invest in this area, I want to stop doing this. So change management is the daily churn in your business. So as you can see from the left-hand side of your screen, if you don't change manage, if you don't constantly involve your business, move your business, drive your business, then you're going to lose your market position. You're going to lose your stakeholder credibility. You're going to lose some of your key employees who wants to work for an organisation that's stuck in the 1980s. Not many. And likewise, employee engagement, staff motivation. If you're going to be at the forefront of what you want to achieve, you want to be at the forefront of your sector, at the forefront of your industry. Okay, I did mention Brexit. I mentioned Brexit once, so here it comes. Brexit will bring a lot of change or some change to your business. I'm not going to get political. It could be for the plus, it could be for the minus. But what we'll see over the next 4 months as we leave, over the 6, 9, 12 months, 2020, 22, there will be change. Laws will change, employment law will change, customs, imports, tax, tariffs will change. It will bring change for your business. So again, if you are a client of Moorepay, we're ahead of the curve. We can help you through the process as we go along. If you're not a Moorepay client, and I advise against that, but if you don't want to become a Moorepay client, then I would heavily suggest that you take professional advice, and as the markets change, as employment law change, that you change with it. Okay, some examples for change include, and down the right-hand side of your column, growth opportunities, new markets, economic downturns, technological changes, mergers, acquisitions, all of that and more, many, many more, will bring change into your business. contracts are won and lost. We deal a lot with the third sector. Charity funding is won and lost. I've got an interesting case at the moment that I'm not going to give too many graphic details about, as I'm sure you can agree, but it's a sheet metal company. They've been served a noise abatement order by the local authority, which means they're having to shut down the night shift. They're having to invest in a lot of technology. That means that they can produce their products quieter. They're having to outsource some products. So they're effectively, their business has had to totally redesign how it runs itself. So that's a perfect example of change management. It's often not just one thing changing in the business. It can be several changing things in the business. And it's all about how we deal with our employees, how we deal with our people, how we respect their employment rights, but just as importantly, how we respect the right of your business to make the changes it needs to operate in 2018, 2019 and beyond. Okay, dealing with people. So if we could move the slide over to contractual and non-contractual changes now, please. Thank you very much, Stuart. Okay, you have a relationship with your employees. They turn up, hopefully, every day and do a day's work. You pay them, so there's a contractual relationship there. However, that relationship is split neatly into two things. Things that are set in stone. Contracts, contractual, are things like place of work, their job title, what their hours are, when they work, when you pay them, how often you pay them, notice periods. All of these things are set down in the contract of employment. But also you have other relationships with them, okay? Those are non-contractual. How you do your work, the work duties, when they go on their lunch, when they go on their break. Do you use one pension provider? Do you change to another pension provider? I'm not going to work through that list, but there's lots of lightweight relationships that you have with your employees. What mileage do you pay them for their cars? All of that things is non-contractual. All of those things are non-contractual. So the non-contractual things you should emphasize on the word should be able to change fairly easy without being at risk of constructive dismissal. Ultimately, it's only a judge can tell you what is contractual and non-contractual. But what I would suggest you do if you are a client of ours and are looking to change non-contractual or contractual is you call our advice line. Our advice line, employment law advice line, is there 24/7 to give, if you take the product offers, the insured advice. It's important if you think you're removing something non-contractual, and the famous one is Christmas bonuses, and we're coming up to that time of year again. You may think, it may even state in the handbook that it's non-contractual, but you're at risk of running something what's known as custom and practice. You've paid a Christmas bonus for the last 10 years. You think it's non-contractual. Your employee thinks it's contractual. You decide you can't pay it this year for market conditions or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're in tribunal. So again, that's why important that you talk to us before you decide to implement any contractual or non-contractual changes. One of the reasons I'm saying this, that you seek our advice, is that there's been a removal of tribunal fees, and we've seen kind of tribunal claims absolutely rocket through the roof. If you're not a client of ours, then please seek qualified legal advice before you actually change somebody's contractual or even non-contractual terms of their employment. And don't forget, the only person that can tell you for a fact if something is non-contractual or contractual is a judge. So if there's any doubt, seek qualified advice. But non-contractual, you should be able to change fairly easier, light touch, minimum touch. Contractual, we may have to go through a more detailed procedure, and it's the procedure that I'm going to talk about on the next slide, which is the business rationale. So Stuart, if we could just move on a slide, please. Okay, the business rationale. The tribunal, in the event that you end up in a tribunal, and it's our job to keep you out of them, and it's also our job that if you do end up in them, that we look to support you and fight your corner. But if you do end up in a tribunal, the tribunal will closely look at what is your business rationale. A tribunal is not allowed to run your business for you. it is not allowed to throw its own view over your business. However, I'm going to get quite wordy now. A tribunal will look at a proportionate means to achieve a legitimate business aim. Is what you're doing a proportionate means to achieve a legitimate business aim? If the answer is yes, then you have a good business rationale. Okay, we'll talk about the process in future, but right now let's work on the business rationale. A tribunal will look at 4 key areas, and as you can see them on the screen in front of you. First of all, they'll look at the background. What has brought the business here? Why do we need to do what we're doing? What do we need to do to rectify or improve? I'm dealing at the moment, and again, no names to protect companies, but an MD in his rationale wanted to make an extra person redundant so he could get his 1980s Space Invaders machine into the office. He could clear a desk space. We had a full and frank discussion to say that if you're challenged on that rationale in tribunal, you will fail. So again, a company owner can do whatever he wants, but to be safe in tribunal, I'm coming back to that original wording, it's got to be a proportionate means to achieve a legitimate business aim. And playing Space Invaders, I would argue, is not a legitimate business aim. So again, that needs to be in place, the background. What has brought us here? What do we need to rectify or improve? And why? Okay. A tribunal cannot project themselves onto your business, but they do need to see that what you're doing is a legitimate business aim and doing it by a proportionate means. Who is affected? Well, it's fairly obvious, isn't it? It's staff. But often it's wider than that. If you're looking to change things in your business, consider any staff, okay? So you think, I want to change a shift, I want to run a new product line, I want to install a new canning plant. Well, the answer is, well, my staff are affected. Yeah, but which staff? Please consider any staff on maternity leave, any staff on long-term sickness, any other associated workers such as cleaners and people that work in the staff canteen. I mentioned previously about a sheet metal company that are having to change their business. Well, as a default, they've had to shut down their works canteen because quite simply they can't afford to pay cooks when there's no staff there to cook from. So often who is affected, you need to actually look down your business and across your business and people that are not there because of particularly maternity leave or sickness. I mentioned tribunals, and I don't kind of want to refer to them too often because they're not nice places to be. But things like people on maternity leave, people with disabilities, they can be uncapped awards. That means there's no limit to the award. So it's important that when you work out what you're looking to change in your business, you can correctly identify who exactly is affected. Because the last thing you need is a lady phoning you up and saying, I've had my 12 months maternity leave, I want to come back to the business now. And you go, you've no job to come back to. That's the worst case scenario. So please identify who is affected. Okay, and look at timescales. Again, today's presentation is a little bit wordy. Timescales, building a contingency. What do I mean by that? Well, you think, well, I want to roll out some kind of significant change. Well, if you do that and staff disagree, you may even have to dismiss them. You cannot physically force somebody to work on a night shift. You cannot physically force somebody to work in a different department. So if you have to dismiss people, and this is where we're getting really to the wire, and that is many people, then there's government forms you have to fill in, and again, we can help with that. But if you are dismissing 20 staff or more, you have to give them 30 days consultation. And if you're dismissing 100 staff or more, then you've got to give 45 days consultation. And that's not a Moorepay thing, that's a government thing, that's a law thing. So if you are looking to really drive through some quite dangerous changes, it can be done, we can help, but there is some government red lines regarding what timescales you have to give. You've got to fill out certain government forms. Again, this presentation is not about that. It's certainly something that we can help with on an individual basis. Fourthly, look at long-term implications. When are you going to need another review? from a staff morale, there's nothing worse than having your terms and conditions changed, and then 3 months later they changed again, and then 3 months later they changed again. As much as a HR professional would like to admit, people do not really like change. So if you're going to do it once, and then hopefully staff morale will quickly improve, and you can get round to running your business more successfully. Also, think about long-term employment legislation and case law changing on the horizon. What are the long-term implications of your changing? If you're changing pay rates, that's great, that's wonderful. But when's the next time minimum wage goes up? So you may have lengthy pay negotiations. We've just gone through it with a minimum wage, so everybody's had a bit of an increase. If you're doing it again, there's no point doing it in September when you know that the fact that the pay will increase on national minimum wage in October. So you need to look at long-term implications. Doing change now is fine, but hopefully we won't have to do it in future. So there's 4 areas you need to look at to have a strong business case to set off your change management. Okay, let's look at the required process so we can move on to the next slide. Okay, this can be a very dangerous slide because you may have to take drastic action. We'll talk about the early stages of putting change in. And that's something that HR professionals, business owners do on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis. But ultimately, what happens if staff refuse? There are some militant people out there. Many of our clients have kind of collective agreements, trade union agreements, and at some point, staff may refuse to change. So this is a little bit of a slide that makes me nervous because each case is individual. But if I can give you a broad brush approach, okay, step 1, if we can just reveal that. Step 1, speak with affected staff informally. There should be a good time for you to chat to your staff. Okay, that can be in staff meetings, toolbox talks, whatever you want. But if you are putting in small changes, such as pay frequency, like we're moving from the 24th to the 27th of each month, or we're moving from weekly payroll to monthly payroll, have a chat with your staff. What you'll get back is things like, well, if you're changing pay frequency, I can't pay my rent. Okay, so what do I need to do to get over that objection? That may be a short-term loan. It may be giving them notice of a few months to have a chat to their bank with arranging standing orders and et cetera, but chat to your staff and then nip it in the bud. That's the emphasis there. However, you need to carefully consider discrimination. The HR professionals out there will understand that if you have somebody coming back to you saying, well, I really can't do that because I'm a committed Christian and I can't work on a Sunday morning, or I have a speech impediment and you're asking me to do more phone work, then you may think, well, hang on a minute, my alarm bell's ringing, I need to back off. So speak to staff, get staff on board, watch out for discriminatory features, and therefore you can introduce change fairly informally and effectively when they agree. So step 1, that's the dead easy one. Okay, Stuart, if we can move on to step 2. I did mention that staff can be resistant to change. It's a natural human feeling. If staff are not engaged at the first level, at step 1, which is, well, can you work later or earlier, or can you work in a different department or in a different organisation? If staff effectively push back and say, well, not really, I'm not doing it. Step 2, at that point, we've got to invite to formal consultation meetings. The reason we're doing this is because we're now creating a paper trail, and tribunals love a paper trail. If you're in tribunal, okay, you will not be able to remember what conversations you've had with staff 6, 9, 12, 18 months ago, so you need to create the paper trail of formal consultations. Who said what, when it was said, and what was said. And likewise, if you're looking to bring mass change, you can't speak to 150 people all in one meeting. So what you probably need to do is either, if you can't do a one-to-one, you need to elect reps, okay? And if you can do that, case law says that kind of a 2-week consultation period should be enough. However, I do relate back to my previous slide when I talked about this government form. For the nerds out there, it's called the HR1. And if you are effectively forcing through change and may have to dismiss people, okay, we've got to go through the relevant notice periods. But again, please take professional advice before you get to this stage, because ultimately, if you are dismissing 60 people, potentially there's 60 tribunal claims waiting for you, and I wouldn't want that on anybody. And for the double nerds out there, the HR1, it's not just for redundancy. A lot of HR people think, oh, yeah, I'm making a lot of people redundant. I've got to fill out a HR1. It's for all dismissals. So if you're looking to force through change, and this can be very risky, the HR1 encapsulates all of that. Okay, hopefully you won't get there. Stage 2, things are looking serious. We're getting to formal consultations. There's formal questions going backwards and forwards between the reps and the workers, and hopefully we can get to an agreement and we implement that agreement and off we go. But let me get to the worst case scenario with me, Stuart. If stage 2 fails, if you have, I mentioned 60, it could be any number of people saying that, no, I will not work a day shift, I will not change my bonus scheme, I will not change my sales incentive, I will not give up my company car. Please remember, change can be absolutely anything in your business. Worst case scenario, you may have to dismiss them. If there is no agreement reached by the end of the process, what do? You're going to have to dismiss them. Now, step 3 says dismissal and re-engagement. That sounds a little bit counterintuitive, doesn't it? Well, why do I sack them and then I try and re-employ them in the same sentence? Once dismissed, an employee has a legal obligation to mitigate their losses. So if you dismiss somebody, and in their eyes, that's an unfair dismissal. They've been dismissed. They can't sit on the settee and watch Netflix for the next 6 months thinking, well, when I get in a tribunal, all my wages will be paid by my previous employer. It doesn't work that way. The employee has an instant obligation to mitigate their losses. So if you dismiss somebody and then immediately try to rehire them, there's a very good argument to say that they can't demonstrate any loss to tribunal. You fire them at 4 o'clock and you try and engage them at 4:01 on a new contract. Where is their loss? Their loss. And there isn't one. So it's a bit of a technical thing to do. If you do have to do it, then your argument in tribunal is we try to mitigate our employee's loss immediately. So in the event that the dismissal is deemed unfair, your secondary argument is, well, it might have been unfair, but we try to rehire immediately. So it's a bit of a damage limitation issue, is that. But again, that's quite an extreme situation, but your business may have to get there because ultimately you own your business, you run your business, and you decide how your business operates, not your employees. Okay. So again, pretty wordy this morning. Again, slides are available and we're shortly coming up to the questions. So if I can, I'll briefly go through the conclusion. We're kind of coming in on time at 20 minutes. The conclusion, right, okay. First of all, if you have to make changes to your business, and all businesses do have to make changes on a monthly, yearly, biannually basis, first thing, what are you trying to achieve? You need a clear business goal. Again, I'm coming back to that proportionate means to a legitimate business aim. If you go into tribunal and say we had to fire somebody because the MD wanted their Space Invaders machine in the office, it'll be a very short tribunal, I promise you that. But if you can go in there and demonstrate market forces, demonstrate contracts won and lost, demonstrates a genuine business need to do things differently, a tribunal should look sympathetically on you. So, conclusion, what are you trying to achieve? Are the changes contractual or non-contractual? I mentioned earlier, non-contractual are easier to achieve than the other. So if it's something like changing dinner breaks, you can work out that's probably not contractual, so a change would carry less risk. Point number 3, always go informal before formal. If you involve staff at an early stage, you can get better outcomes. You genuinely can. Engage with your staff, discuss the reasons why you're looking to achieve what you're trying to achieve, overcome objections, and keep staff on your side. It is a lot easier to do that than it is to get into some kind of formal conflict where positions become entrenched. And 4th point, before we kind of move on to the Q&A session, if you do have to force through a change, take professional advice and understand the risks. If you're a customer of ours and use us, that's fantastic. If you involve us from the get-go, you've hopefully fully covered, your insurance is in place. So should you fall down in tribunal, and hopefully you won't, but if so, it'll be your insurance that's picking up the tab and not yourselves. Just one final note before we do move on to the questions. A tribunal will not look at your ability to pay. It is not means tested. If you are Microsoft, if you are Apple, or if you have a small shop, the law is the same. So if they fine you £30,000, they fine you £30,000 irrespective of your business. So if you do take our insurance, then that should give you the ability to sleep at night. Okay, I did promise some questions, so you've listened to me for long enough, so we can move on to any questions. So if I can hand you back to you, Stuart, and we can hopefully take some questions.
Certainly can. Thanks, Carl, for that. First of all, I always find myself enlightened when I join one of your webinars. So that's really exciting. So, if you haven't posted a question yet, and you've got something burning, as I say, you find that question box in the panel, and we'll be able to pick them up from there. We've already had a few come in, and we've had a couple of others. So, in fact, several here. So I'll start from the top. And then and we can just work our way through. This should be very engaging, right? So the first one we've had come in is the work at an alcohol abuse charity that has resubmitted to tender to the NHS and lost the contract to another provider. So how do they make the staff redundant? Okay, good question.
I think I may have a good answer for the person who issued the question. First of all, I need to know a little bit more. The devil is in the detail. But quite probably, they will not make their staff redundant at all. There's some legislation called Cupid, which basically means if work transfers to another organisation, people follow that work. So again, if they want to contact me for better detail, they may not have to make anybody redundant. If they've lost the contract and the work is kind of identifiable after they've lost that contract, staff will transfer with all their liability intact, with all their service intact to the new provider. So the good news is, well, the bad news is you've lost the contract. The good news is the liability with that passes to the incoming provider. Okay.
Right. Okay. It's nice and neat, isn't it? Another question coming here. Let's have a look. We've got this is from Nutley. Some of the askers, some of the names are here, and some of the names are not here. So if I don't refer to you, it's not personal. So the question: surely, if the contract states discretionary bonus, then non-payment of a bonus is legitimate, irrespective of whether payment has been made before? Question mark.
Yeah, it comes back to custom and practice. If you write in your handbook, this bonus is non-contractual, it doesn't automatically protect you against a claim or even successful claim. I agree with you. You can write to your heart's content in your handbook that it's non-contractual, but it may be the equivalent of writing in your handbook that you're allowed to do 90 miles an hour on the motorway when in company business. You can write it. It doesn't necessarily make it so. Custom and practice. If you have paid a bonus in a certain style over many months, many years, and then withdraw it, at some point non-contractual has evolved into the contract. that custom and practice says that on the 1st of July they get £5,000 bonus, and that's been the same for the last 10 years. And this year it's different, just because you can point at, regretfully, and I'm sorry to say this, just because you can point at a line in the handbook or the contract or any other documentation saying it's discretional. Well, for 10 years it's not been discretional, and this year it is, and a judge would look at very hard at that and ask you some very awkward questions. So I'm sorry about that. That hopefully is a great defence, but it's regretfully maybe not a watertight defence of saying we've got it in our T's and C's that it's non-contractual. Thanks.
Right, and just out of curiosity, if a £5,000 for 10 years, is there a number of years after which it becomes, it swaps from being non-contractual to custom and practice?
Yeah, that's the horrible counterintuitive thing about employment law. There's nothing set down in stone. What a tribunal judge would look at is, what is that bonus based on? Is it based on profits? If it's based on attendance? If it's based on company performance, individual performance? At some point, the judge will make his mind up that that's a set-in-stone benefit and not something which is a company kind of flirty, once every now and again bonus. But regretfully, Stuart, there's nothing set in stone. If so, it'd make everybody's lives a lot easier.
Indeed. Okay, let's move on. Next question. I think relating to proportional means of achieving business aims. What kind of things are legitimate? This is air quotes, legitimate business aims.
Okay, you are allowed to run your business exactly how you want within the law. So if you have, let's just pick a random example, you have a printing company, and you're in London, and you have a satellite company in Leeds, and you decide to shut your Leeds company down because of whatever reason. You just want to move it to London, you want to centralise everything. A judge will not look at that and said, no, you should have kept your Leeds branch open. A judge will say, okay, you've decided to shut your Leeds branch, and I've no issue with that. It's your business, do what you want, but have all the redundancies been done in a fair way at your Leeds company. So basically, you can do what you want within the law, but a tribunal will look, have you done them fairly? So they can't second guess. They can't say, well, you should have kept your Leeds branch open. All they'll look at is, have you shut your Leeds branch in a fair and proper way? So again, run your business how you want, but do everything when you do your contractual changes or do your change management properly. You should be fine. I don't know who the questions come from, but if you want to give me a call afterwards, if you've got any particular objective in mind, I'll gladly have a discuss and we'll work out, is it a proportionate means for a legitimate business aim? I know it's a bit of a wordy thing, but it does come up all the time in a tribunal judge's mind. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Carl. And I guess there was a follow-up, a separate question, which maybe is covered in that, and it's quite open. So thanks for this one, Maureen. In respect of dismissal, what's the position on redundancy?
Sorry, could you repeat that? It just broke up a little bit.
Yeah, sorry. It's quite an open question. In respect of dismissal, what is the position on redundancy?
Okay, yes, right. Okay, I talked about nerds twice. I'm going to declare myself as out and proud as a massive nerd. Technically, redundancy is a dismissal. If you release somebody from their contract, in pretty much any way, it is a dismissal. So technically, redundancy is a dismissal. But don't forget, there's other types of dismissal. And again, I realise people are zoning out now because it's kind of we're into nerd speak. Contractual dismissal, summary dismissal, they're all dismissals. So if it's for the purposes of the government form I talked about, the HR1, we complete that because a redundancy is a dismissal, but so is a contractual dismissal, etc., etc., etc. Nobody likes to use the word dismissal because it's got a bit of a connotation about it. But technically, a redundancy is a dismissal, even we don't like to use the kind of D word because it's got various kind of implications. So yes, so a redundancy is a dismissal. Sorry. Thanks.
Brilliant. Okay. I think we've got another 4 or 5 questions here, so I'll try and if I can with them. This one from Elizabeth. If the contractor is on maternity leave, has gone through consultation and post is no longer at risk, and therefore the fixed term contract runs its course. Presumably there is no obligation to find suitable alternative post or pay any redundancy.
Okay. Yeah, okay. It depends. Even an employee on a fixed-term contract, once they get to more than 2 years' service, they would be due a redundancy payment. So regretfully, we'd have to make sure that even though it's a fixed-term contract, their dismissal was fair. But the question is, if you wasn't going to renew that fixed-term contract, then you'd have to go through a process to release them from the contract, even though it's fixed term. The only other issue is if they'd have been at work and you would have renewed their contract, and the only reason you've not renewed it is because they're on maternity leave, then that's not a great place to be. They may come after you for a sex discrim claim to say their contract has not been renewed due to their maternity status. But if it naturally would have ended and it wouldn't have gone beyond then, that's fine. But if they have more than 2 years service, you must involve them in a process to make sure that their dismissal is quote unquote fair.
Righty-ho.
Okay.
We've got a question here. Yes, it's real good. Question here referring back to the bonus position. It's an interesting take on it. It's regarding Christmas bonus. And this is from Nikki. We acquired a company and the staff were paid Christmas bonus. We honoured it last year. This year, there are none of the Tute staff left, but there is our staff who also benefited from bonus last year. We don't need to pay this year, but will that be a problem?
I'd like to know more detail on that before I can give an opinion, if I may. So maybe that person with Stuart's help or my help, we can get in contact with each other. But if you paid a bonus as a one-off last year, what was the basis that you paid that bonus? Was it because it's Christmas? Or was it because the business had had a successful year end? If it's just because it's Christmas, then if you've just done it the once, then it's possibly not contractual. But likewise, if it's business performance and your business has not performed well this year, then it may not be payable in any case. But if you can let myself or Stuart have your details, then I'll gladly have a discussion offline and we can get into a bit of depth about that. Thanks.
Okay, brilliant. So, Nikki, on that one, if you'd like to post your information in the chat or in the question box, or email it through to Carl and myself, then we'll be able to pick that up after. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so we'll just maybe take 2 or 3 more questions, see where we get to. This one from Suzanne, and I'm trying to cover as many different angles as I can on these. This one from Suzanne. If our employees don't have any contracts in their files and there is no record of a contract, can we issue new contract of employment and ask them to sign without having to do all the meetings? We're not trying to change terms and conditions. We're only trying to ensure they have terms and conditions signed.
Okay. Don't tell any of your employees of this, but they legally should have contracts within the first 8 weeks of their employment. Don't tell them that, otherwise they can bring a claim. So let's just forget that and move aside. Indeed, what you probably need to do from a housekeeping perspective is sit staff down and explain we're not looking to change anything. We're doing a housekeeping session. I think you work Monday to Friday, 9 till 5. I think you earn £8.25 an hour. I think you work in the sew shop. And then get all that information from them, issue them a contract, get them to sign the contract that reflects their current terms, stick it on file, and fingers crossed, you've had a win there.
Right.
Thanks.
Good response, Carl. Thanks. We'll just have quickly take on 2 more, and then I think we're probably out of time. We'll close down. So, one of the last 2. Bonuses. If you change payment from quarterly annual payments, would you need to consult?
I'd have a brief consultation. However, what you're doing is not changing their pay at all. All you're doing is changing the pay frequency, so it's less contentious. So if you explain to staff that we're doing this for XYZ reasons, cash flow reasons, I don't know, business reasons, and ask them to budget proportionally, you're probably fine, because what you'd be explaining to the tribunal is we didn't give anybody a pay cut. We didn't make anybody worse off. We just changed the pay frequency. You've less exposure in tribunal. But again, consult with them, overcome objections, and if you do get objections and you are a client of ours, please give us a call. You probably know the numbers. I can give it if needs be. 0845 073 0240, and then option 2 if you're a client of ours. If you're not a client of ours, then I would kind of seek advice and get some more in-depth information to your advisor. But it shouldn't be a massive thing, because you're not lowering pay, you're just changing frequency. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Carl. And so we'll take this as the last question, I think, and then we better draw to a close. So last question from Trinace. When do you need to complete a HR1? Just for 20 or more employees?
Yeah, it all depends on what have you been doing recently at your work. If you made 20 people redundant in the last 90 days, then you need to be doing a HR1 for the next redundancy. Sorry, I tell a lie. 19 people redundant in the last 90 days before you do a HR1. It's defined as one establishment. So if you've got lots of little branches, and this is a famous bit of case law from Woolworths that shut down loads of branches and claimed that because they employed less than 20 each, it was not one establishment. But if you have made no redundancies recently, then if you need to make 20 people redundant or more, and that is not 20 people at risk, that is actually making 20 redundancies. And I come back to the point I made earlier that a redundancy is a dismissal. You would have to complete a HR1. Again, with that document, you submit it to the government, and once you've submitted it, the clock starts ticking, and you cannot make your first redundancy until you've hit 30 days. So you can consult, you can let them know your thoughts and your intentions, your employees, your thoughts and intentions, but you cannot make anybody redundant until 20 days have clicked by, 30 days have clicked by from your submission of your HR1. And again, if you're looking to make 100 people or more, then that is 45 days. For the optimists out there, it used to be until fairly recently 90 days, but the Tory government have changed that now to 45 days. But if you dismiss before the government prescribed limits, you are committing an offence, and again, you are acting outside of the law. So 20 redundancies or more, 30 days. 100, 45 days. Okay, thanks.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Carl. Now, conscious of time, so I'll just go to the last couple of points on the webinar. First one, as Carl mentioned earlier, there's a host of other content available, all free, available on the Moorepay website. The easiest way to find it is to go to moorepay.co.uk/resources, and you'll find on there. First of all, you'll find our monthly employment law guide, which is obviously a good roundup of HR and employment law topics. You'll also find our webinars with all our upcoming webinars available, and also links to all our past webinars as well, so you can explore and look through those. But we've got white papers, we have mini guides, we have legislation explainers, we have consultation pieces, we have surveys and statistical resources, all manner of things, and I encourage you to head there and explore. And if there's anything that's not there and you'd like to know more about, please let us know, because we're always keen to find out topics of interest and put that out there for people. So that's the additional content available, and you'll also another great way of obviously getting hold of that content is if you connect with us. So Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. If you search for Moorepay, you'll find us in there, and follow us, or whatever the correct word is, in each of those apps, and we post 2 or 3 links a day to relevant blogs and guides and things that we have that are current. Of course, you can always call us and email us anytime, and we will make sure we get you added to mailing lists. And obviously, if you go on the website, you'll also be able to join the mailing list from there as well. But I'd say that's Moorepay. That's how to connect with us. I'll say thanks again to Carl for a really good in-depth session, and thanks to everyone who's joined today and taken part. And thanks for your questions. I think it's been really enlightening and really interesting. So we'll close down the webinar there, and I say I wish you all a lovely day, and we'll follow up with the slides and the recording as soon as they're available. Okay, so I'll leave it there. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks, Carl.
Thank you. Bye-bye.